Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. This is the program that's been voted number 1 by Samoan taxi drivers. Yes, if you go to the island of Samoa today, find a taxi driver and thank them for listening to Daily Dose Radio. We're looking today at verses 9 through 11. I wanted to make a comment about 8 because we had in 6 and 7 the confession of faith. You are my God. I mean, that was the big punch. I said it was the great statement of faith. And then everything sort of flows off of that. Now we come back in 8, and the wicked man is reintroduced. We had him up in verse 4, and we had him up in the first part of 1, 2, and 3. So now we come to verses 9 through 11, and the wicked man is introduced in 8. Do not give the wicked their desire, his device do not promote, lest he be exalted, Selah. Then we have them being discussed in 9 through 11. So let me read those verses for you. The head of the ones who surround me, cover them with the mischief of their lips. Let the coals of fire drop upon them. Let them fall into pits from which they cannot rise. A slanderer do not establish in the earth. Let the violent man be hunted by evil quickly. Some interesting pieces here. First of all, notice the comparison between verse 7 and verse 9. My head, or the head of the believer, is covered in the day of battle. Why is that? Because the Lord is keeping. Because we ask, remember, we ask in verse 4, keep me from the hand of the wicked, from the violent man you will keep me. And then in verse 7, our confession is, O Lord God, the strength of my salvation, you have covered my head in the day of battle. Now in verse 9, when we talk about the wicked, their head is not covered. The head of the ones who surround me, cover them with the mischief of their lips. So I say it's not covered. That is, it's not covered by the hand of the Lord, but it's covered with something else. And isn't it interesting how the fruit of the lips here is what covers them? And isn't it interesting that we have so much here in connection with the violent man, with the wicked man, that has to do with his language, his lips, his tongue, all of that. Under the lips, there's poison. The tongue is sharpened like serpents. So this wicked man has a wicked mouth as well. His heart not only is corrupt, but his tongue and his lips are also corrupt, and they're speaking wicked things. So let that wickedness, that mischief that spews out of their mouth, let that cover their head, you see. So in the day of battle, my head's covered, but the head of the wicked man, his head is covered with the mischief of his lips. Let coals of fire drop upon them. Let them fall into pits from which they cannot rise. Remember what they were doing in verse 5? In verse 5, the wicked were hiding a trap, setting a net, setting snares. Well, here we have, psalmist is praying, let coals of fire drop on them. Let them fall into pits. See, they set pits for the righteous. That's their M.O. That's what they do. But the psalmist is taking that and he's praying against them. Let them fall into the pits. And then we have verse 11. Again, it's fascinating, isn't it? That the language, the mouth, the lips, the tongue is what distinguishes these people. That sets them apart from this person who is confessing, Lord, you are my God. Look at verse 11. A slanderer, do not establish in the earth. So the prayer now, again, this is the voice of the church. The prayer is the ones who are slandering us, Lord, don't establish them. Don't give them any place. And notice that, in verse 8, we had him saying, do not promote. Here we have him saying, do not establish. So not only don't promote them, because if you promote them, they'll be exalted. They'll think, oh, look at me, look how great I am. But here it says, do not establish them. Don't even give them a foothold. Let the violent man be hunted by evil quickly. And that word quickly, you might have it translated speedily. It's a very difficult word, and it's unique. It occurs only here in the Old Testament, in the text of the Hebrew Bible, only here in verse 11 of Psalm 140. It means thrust by thrust. So the Lord is hunting them or the psalmist is saying, let the violent man be hunted by evil, thrust by thrust. So what's the thrusting? Well, that's the weapons of the hunter thrusting at the violent man. So he's constantly being harassed, followed, and pursued. That's the idea. Quickly after the violent man, never letting up, he's going to run out of steam. Join me tomorrow. We're going to look at verses 12 and 13 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.